What's happening inside your body right now when you're anxious? The racing heart, the tight chest, the shallow breath is almost chemically identical to what happens when you're excited. Same hormones, same nervous system activation, same physical signature down to the cellular level. The only difference is the story your brain tells about it. That sounds like a minor distinction. It isn't, because the story your brain picks, anxiety or excitement, determines whether you show up or shrink back, whether you perform or freeze, whether you take the thing on or quietly decide, it's not really for someone like me. And most people never realize they're choosing. They feel the activation, they accept the first label their brain assigns, and they let anxiety drive. This video is about that choice. Why do most people miss it? What it costs them? And what you can do, specifically practically, to stop handing anxiety the wheel by default. Here's something your biology class probably didn't explain clearly enough. Your nervous system doesn't label signals. When your body enters a state of heightened arousal, with an increased heart rate, adrenaline rushing, blood shifting toward your limbs, and senses sharpening, it isn't sending you a message that says this is fear or excitement. Instead, it's sending one message. Pay attention, something important is happening. That's the entire message. What happens afterward is entirely your brain's interpretation. Your brain examines the physical signals, considers the surrounding context, recalls your personal history, and constructs an emotion on top of the raw sensation. The physical state comes first. The feeling, the specific emotion you identify, is built on top of it. Two people backstage before a performance. Same environment. Same body chemistry doing the same things. One is buzzing, focused, ready to perform. The other feels nauseous, frozen, and already planning the apology they'll give afterward for how badly it went. There's no difference in their physiology. Everything different is what their brain interpreted the physiology to mean. Most people never realize they're interpreting anything. They feel the sensation and assume it's a direct reflection of reality, as if their body is a perfectly calibrated instrument, and the emotion they feel is an objective truth. It isn't. The feeling is a construction. And that means it can be built anew. In 1974, two psychologists conducted one of the most disturbing experiments in social psychology. They had a female researcher approach men on two different bridges. One was stable, low, wooden, nothing special. The other was a narrow suspension bridge, 230 feet above a rocky gorge, with low handrails, swaying underfoot, the kind of crossing that makes your body alert whether you want it or not. After each crossing, the men were approached, given a short questionnaire, and handed the researcher's phone number, in case they had questions. The men who crossed the suspension bridge, already physiologically aroused from fear, were significantly more likely to call. Their questionnaire responses showed more romantic themes in their writing. They reported more attraction. Their brains, already primed from the bridge, encountered an attractive person and mistakenly linked that arousal to attraction, not fear. They confused fear with attraction literally. This is called misattribution of arousal, and it's not just a quirky phenomenon in experiments. It happens all the time. You have a tense argument with your boss, go home, and snap at the first person who says something mildly annoying, because the activation from one situation spills over into the next, and your brain doesn't always recognize where it's coming from. You feel more anxious about your life after watching something stressful on TV. You can't tell if you're nervous about a meeting or just wired from too much coffee. But here's the version of misattribution that does the most damage. Someone offers you a genuine opportunity, a real one, the kind that could actually change your life, and your body activates. Your heart rate climbs. Something tightens in your chest, and your brain scans those signals and responds with, danger. You're not ready. This isn't for you. Don't. And so you decline or say yes, and then quietly sabotage it, or you wait too long, and it slips away. Your body was preparing you for that moment. Your brain called it a warning, and you listened. That's misattribution. And that's what it really costs. Anxiety and excitement are not opposites. When you're anxious, your sympathetic nervous system activates, releasing adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart rate increases, and your breathing becomes shallower and faster. Your body prepares for a threat. When you're genuinely excited, the same system activates with the same hormones, heart rate response, and breathing shift. Your body prepares for opportunity. The physiological responses are nearly identical. The difference isn't in the signal, it's in the direction your brain perceives it. Harvard Business School researcher Alison Woodbrooks has studied this overlap directly. Her work shows that anxiety and excitement are both high arousal states, with the arousal being the same. What differs is the meaning your brain assigns negative or positive, threat or opportunity. Because the arousal is so similar, a striking implication emerges. It's much easier to shift from anxiety to excitement than from anxiety to calm. Most people, before a high-stakes moment, try to tell themselves to calm down, relax, breathe, and settle. But that approach usually doesn't work sustainably or effectively, because trying to calm yourself when your body is already activated fights your physiology. The system is already engaged. Stopping it goes against the current and requires immense effort, often failing. Instead, reappraising the activation, telling your brain that what you're feeling is readiness, energy, or your body showing up aligns with the current. You're not changing the signal but redefining what it means. Brooks' research clearly shows that people who reframe their anxiety as excitement perform noticeably better in public speaking, math tests under pressure, or high-stakes negotiations. The difference isn't just in physical sensations, but in the story they tell themselves about what their body is doing. So if the science is this clear, why does anxiety's label win so reliably? Why is the negative interpretation the default? 2 reasons. Both are uncomfortable. First, your brain is wired to treat ambiguity as a threat. Evolution didn't select for optimism, it selected for survival. A brain that interpreted unclear signals as potential dangers was more likely to avoid predators, mistakes, or being caught off guard. That brain lived long enough to pass on its genes. The cautious brain, the threat-detecting brain, is the one we inherited. When your nervous system activates, and your brain doesn't have a clear reason to call it safe, it leans toward danger. That's not a malfunction, it was a feature. But in a modern context, where the threat is a job interview, a creative project, or an important conversation, this wiring becomes problematic. Your body reacts in the moment. Your brain perceives danger. Suddenly, you're managing anxiety instead of directing energy. Second, your history is preloaded into your interpretation. Appraisal doesn't happen in a vacuum. When your brain assigns meaning, it pulls from a library of past experiences, failures, pain, and past errors. If you've bombed a presentation before, the next time your body reacts ahead of one, your brain already has a template. Last time I felt this way, it went badly. The activation reaches your conscious awareness, already labeled with dread. You're not just sensing the present. You're interpreting it through everything that happened to you before. This is why anxiety can seem so disproportionate to actual risk. The current situation might be survivable or even trivial, but it's echoing something older, a moment when this same physical feeling preceded something painful. The body reacts the same way. The brain assumes the same outcome. The feeling is in the present. The interpretation is rooted in the past. And you end up navigating the present through a filter designed for a very different time. Here's what happens when anxiety consistently wins the interpretation battle. Not just once, but over years. You start avoiding activation. Not suddenly, not intentionally, subtly. You stop placing yourself in situations that trigger that physical sensation, because you've learned to associate it with something negative: failure, embarrassment, or losing control of how things unfold. So, the pitch doesn't get sent. The conversation doesn't get started. The application hasn't been submitted. Opportunities that would require you to feel activated and uncertain get declined before you seriously consider them. On the surface, you might feel better, less anxious, more comfortable, as if you're taking care of yourself. But in reality, you're organizing your life around avoiding a feeling that, by itself, in your body, before your brain interprets it, is completely neutral. Activation isn't the problem, it's the label you assign to it. Most people never see this. The more you avoid activation, the more threatening it seems when it finally appears. Your brain learns from your behavior. Every time you withdraw because of activation, you teach your brain that this feeling signals real danger. This confirms your interpretation, closing the loop. Those who have been stuck in this cycle for years don't see it as anxiety. That's the clue. They see it as part of their personality. They say they're private. They claim they're not the type to put themselves out there. They insist that the public role, bold moves, or visible effort just isn't really their style. Some of that might genuinely be true, but often, what feels like personality is actually a learned pattern. Feeling activation, interpreting it as a warning, retreating, and doing this so often that the retreat becomes part of their identity. What's truly at stake isn't a single nervous moment before a presentation. It's the slow, cumulative narrowing of what you're willing to try. Let's clarify what the solution is and what it isn't. It's not positive thinking. It's not telling yourself you're not nervous when you clearly are. Research on emotional suppression is consistent. Trying to push a feeling down or pretend it isn't there usually makes it worse. You can't think your way out of a physiological state by denying it exists. What really helps is reappraisal. And reappraisal is different. Suppression says, "I'm not feeling this." Reappraisal says, "I'm feeling this. And here's what it really means." The tool Alison Wood Brooks tested, the one that gave the clearest performance improvements, is simple enough to sound almost dismissible when you first hear it. Before a high-stakes moment, when you feel that surge of activation, say this, out loud if possible, internally if not. I am excited. Not, I am calm. Not, this is fine. Not, I've got this. Those statements try to turn off a signal your body is already signaling. They fight the physiology, and they often feel false, which matters because your brain is quite good at rejecting claims that feel like lies. I am excited doesn't fight the physiology. It redirects it. It recognizes the activation and gives it a direction. Forward, not away. And because excitement and anxiety are physiologically so similar, the reframe doesn't feel like a lie. There's no internal alarm that goes off because you said something your body knows isn't true. The body agrees. It is activated. You're just offering a different explanation for why. And if your first instinct is to find this too simple, I ask you to notice that instinct. The resistance to a straightforward, workable tool is often itself part of the pattern, another way of maintaining the familiar story. It can't be that simple. There must be something more complicated wrong with me. That's the loop talking. The reframe is a skill. It doesn't work perfectly for most people the first time. The default has years of reinforcement behind it. You will need to practice it in low-stakes situations before it's available under real pressure. The first few times, it will feel awkward. That's normal. That's what learning a new way of thinking feels like before it becomes habitual. There's a second tool that works alongside it. A pre-moment pause where you ask one question. What is this activation actually for? Is what I'm about to do truly dangerous? Or is it just unfamiliar? Is this discomfort telling me to stop? Or is it telling me I'm about to do something that matters? Most anxiety doesn't survive that question. When you actually examine the threat level of the situations that trigger the most activation, the danger usually turns out to be social, abstract, and survivable. Not physical. Not permanent. Not catastrophic. Your body fires as if it were catastrophic. That's the wiring. But you don't have to accept the wiring's verdict. You can examine the real stakes and develop an interpretation that matches reality rather than fear. The techniques are important, but the bigger change is how you relate to activation itself. Most people see it as an obstacle, something to manage, reduce, or survive before doing what they truly want to do. The real shift is to start viewing it as information, specifically as readiness. Consider what's happening physically when you feel activated. More oxygen, increased blood flow to your limbs, sharper sensory processing, and faster reactions. Your body is allocating resources toward what's in front of you. It's biochemically trying to help you perform. When anxiety takes over the interpretation, you spend half of those resources fighting your internal state, trying to calm down, suppress sensations, white-knuckle through. Half your capacity is used up managing yourself, while the other half is for performance. When excitement takes the lead, the same resources are entirely dedicated to performing. Activation becomes an asset instead of a liability. That's what distinguishes people who find performing under pressure energizing from those who see it as something to endure. It's not about different nervous systems. It's about different relationships with what their nervous system is doing. The change doesn't happen overnight. It's built through repetition. The consistent practice of pausing between the sensation and the story, and consciously choosing how to interpret it rather than letting default reactions guide you. At first, it requires effort. But over time, it becomes the faster, easier path. Not because the activation stops. That won't happen. But because you no longer automatically give in to anxiety when it arrives. When you stop letting anxiety control your interpretation by default, a few things change, and they build up. You stop fearing the feeling of preparation. That alert state before something important becomes a sign. I'm focused. I'm ready. My body is here for this, instead of evidence that something will go wrong. You stop viewing nervousness as proof of inadequacy. Nervousness and capability are not opposites. Some of the most consistently effective people in high-pressure fields, surgery, performance, elite sports, negotiation, report persistent activation before and during their work. They've learned that this activation doesn't predict the outcome. Caring about something energizes you. That's not a weakness. It's engagement. And the most important part, this is the core, is that the cycle breaks. Activation no longer reliably leads to retreat. The situations you were quietly dismissing before even finishing your thought start becoming options again. Here's the key takeaway. Your brain isn't just a neutral observer of what you feel. It's an active creator. The signals your body sends are raw material. How you interpret them, whether as anxiety, excitement, threat, or readiness, is largely a choice. Most people aren't aware they're making this choice. They notice the activation, accept the initial label, and gradually shrink around it. Over time, this can feel like part of their personality. But you don't have to do that. The reframe isn't a trick or denial. It's a more truthful way to understand what your body is doing. Your nervous system fires because something important is in front of you. It allocates resources and prepares you. That's your body showing up for something that matters. Before moving on, think of one situation where you've consistently labeled that feeling as anxiety and let it decide for you. Just one. What if you called it readiness instead? If this kind of thinking helps you understand why you feel and act the way you do, subscribe. More insights are on the way. See you there.